Did you know that there is an already existing, well-established and researched man-made technology that has proven to bring billions out of poverty? That this technology has rapidly increased our food production, has revolutionized how we are able to interact. This technology saves lives every second and is the reason for economic growth and policy making today. You might already know what technology I'm referring to. It's called electricity, but we think so little about how much it affects our lives from the moment we are born all the way to when we die. We love to use electricity, but we don't want to think about how we get it. Utilities are boring, but I'd like to introduce you to Sarah. I met Sarah in northern Uganda, where I was working on researching her energy needs. Sarah has to think a lot about where she gets her energy from. Her home is not connected to the grid. In fact, the grid will never be extended to her. It costs the Ugandan government far too much to bring that electricity services to her small village. Behind her is a yellow canister, a jerry can, which she uses to collect water from the nearby stream. She also spends a lot of her time collecting fuel wood for cooking. Because of the scarcity of fuel wood now in Uganda, she has to choose between boiling water for sanitation and for cooking, so she uses it for cooking. This is the reality for 1.3 billion people in this world who have to make these energy choices every day, spending up to 40% of their daily income on energy. The United Nations in 2000 developed the Millennium Development Goals, 8 goals designed to eradicate poverty. These include eradicating hunger, increasing education, and improving maternal health. But can anyone here tell me how we can even address any of these goals without addressing what is needed to achieve them? Electricity. You cannot fight poverty from above. It's becoming a zero-sum game. You have to address it from the root. In the United States, we would never think of constructing a hospital that does not have power. In fact, they have to have backup power systems. So why is it acceptable that hospitals are still being constructed in developing countries that have absolutely no energy plans? We have to consider the energy plans of the poor people. They deserve that. The United Nations also realized this, and in 2011 developed Sustainable Energy for All. Secretary Ban Ki-moon devised this initiative because he realized that energy was left out of the Millennium Development Goals. There are 3 goals under this initiative. First, universal energy access by 2030. Second, doubling renewable energy rates. And third, doubling energy efficiency rates by 2030. At the United Nations Foundation, we have an energy access practitioner network comprised of over 1,200 people who are working in off-grid areas delivering clean energy solutions. These include renewable energy technologies like solar, wind, biomass, microgrids, which are far cheaper and easier to install and maintain than extending the grid many miles to underserved populations. So what is the barrier here if the technology is cheaper and easy to scale? The problem is that banks are very confused at how to lend to this sector. They understand providing millions of dollars in investment in large-scale power plants and in big dams. But when it comes to small villages, hundreds of people needing power, which doesn't cost millions of dollars to bring electricity to, it's confusing for them. But there is a cheaper technology available. It doesn't require a lot of financing. So let's bring people out of the dark ages, literally, and into the light and into the modern 21st century. I'd like to revisit Uganda, the nation where Sarah's from. Out of that 1.3 billion figure that I presented, 29 million people do not have access to electricity. This is a staggering 92% of the entire population. 96% you do not have access to modern fuels for cooking. Let's just think about that statistic for a second. 92%. How can Uganda develop with a statistic like that? The Ugandan government says that by 2050, all the forests will be cleared because of the demand for fuel wood. One of the last remaining gorilla populations is in Uganda, and they depend on the forests for survival. So you see, energy is not just a human issue, it affects far more than we can imagine. I'd like to introduce you to Ruth Kisa. She is the CEO and founder of Joint Energy and Environment Projects. This is a community-based organization that she founded 30 years ago on advocating for clean energy solutions to rural Uganda. In one of her hands, she's holding a kerosene burner. Look at that open flame. This is what people use for lighting in these villages. Would you want your children running around the house with an open flame like that? We estimated that about 5 homes burn down in Sarah's village a month because of these types of lighting. And Ruth's other hand is a solar lantern. It's not turned on, but it is far more safe and efficient and brighter than the alternative. It also has capacity for mobile phone charging. These lanterns are more expensive than the alternative up front, but in the long run are far cheaper for the Ugandans because there's no fuel, it's the sun. And the demand is extremely high. The figure 1.3 billion isn't there because people cannot afford power, it's because there is no access for power. So the demand is so high that Ruth has been able to distribute over 16,000 of these lanterns on an operating budget of $30,000 a year. It doesn't take a lot of money to bring energy to these people. They may not have the ability to have the type of energy systems where we can have TEDx conferences, but they still need that energy just to have a simple light bulb in their home. There is another challenge that I haven't mentioned, where it's also an opportunity. In Uganda, youth unemployment is at 32%. For skilled college graduates, it's 36%. So you have a huge amount of young people who I can tell you firsthand are energy crazed. They love energy because they use their mobile phones, they like checking their Facebook and using email, just like you and I, and they want this electricity to develop their countries. And they're passionate and want to work on it. The problem is there aren't enough jobs in this sector for young people to get into. So they're all going into the natural gas and oil sector. But there is a huge opportunity here because millions of people need power and millions of people need jobs. So the solution is to create those opportunities, and that's why I founded NVenture. NVenture is a not-for-profit organization that believes in investing in young people to develop clean energy solutions. And I'm very proud of our inaugural class, Miriam and Jeffrey pictured, who together built up a community energy store in this village that has created a supply chain for where men like this gentleman could purchase solar lanterns and water filters for his family. We need to look at this youth as project managers, not simply as technicians or salespeople, because that's one way we can scale up this problem. And we also must not be so short-sighted and forget that in another 22 years, when that UN goal of 2030 hits, the youth in this world will give birth to additional 1.3 billion people that are also going to need this electricity. So we must look at energy not as a technical band-aid, but as a human development issue. Energy affects our age, it affects ages, it affects gender, it affects class. We have to encompass all of those factors when we're devising these energy solutions for these populations. So I titled this talk, The Future We Want, because that was the theme of the United Nations Rio+20 Sustainable Development Conference that occurred last year. This is the largest gathering of sustainable development experts from around the world. Regardless of the outcomes of that conference, I believe the future we want is one with no more darkness. I doctored these pictures of the African continent and of South Asia to show what it could look like, because right now it's completely black if you look at it, a NASA image. A world where is equitable energy access, not only for us, but also for the populations living in these countries. A world where Sarah can come home after toiling in her fields all day and turn on the light in her home and walk over to her kitchen and turn on a gas stove so she can cook for her family. This is what we call equality, because energy is a prerequisite for development and not the result. Thank you.